We have a lot to cover in today's video, including an actual trade between the Detroit Red Wings and the New York Islanders, the first trade we've seen in a while, and we have the latest rumors on the Vegas Golden Knights and some potential moves they might be making. They've been linked to teams like the Penguins and the Nashville Predators, and we also have an update on the Lightning Red Wings potential trade scenario that's been discussed for a while as well. We'll get into all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have an actual trade to discuss. The first one in a while, and it involves the Red Wings and the Islanders. It's a fairly minor trade, but it's the first one we've had in a significant period of time. Actually, the last trade that took place was also involving the Islanders when they traded Devon Toews to the Avalanche. Now, in this deal, the Red Wings trade unsigned forward Dmitri Timashov over to the Islanders for strictly future considerations. I would imagine that the future considerations will be determined by if the player gets signed and if he gets to play and how things go. There probably won't end up being a whole lot of anything going to the Red Wings in the future. But I know Steve Yzerman, the GM of the Red Wings, did mention earlier in the offseason that Timashov was a player they were considering signing, but he was also weighing out other options. It sounded like there was a possibility he could sign overseas, maybe go to the KHL or European League or something to that nature, that he was kind of looking at all options and deciding what he wanted to do. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, maybe he gets more of an opportunity with the Islanders. We know that they could have some of their own cap issues depending on how the Barzal contract, gets done and all that. So maybe they need, some other players who could be on a smaller salary to possibly fill a roster spot and help with their cap situation. And the Islanders could be involved in other trades as they get ready to complete their roster, as I mentioned. A lot of that's going to really hinge on the Barzal contract. So minor deal, but still the first one we've had in quite some time here, and leave it to the Islanders to get things going again. Now, as I mentioned, we have updates on several fronts. I mean, in a really recent interview, Elliot Friedman goes on to talk about the possibility again of the Red Wings and Lightning hooking up on a trade, which is a scenario we've discussed on multiple occasions because it's been rumored for a long time. He mentioned the fact again that the rumor's been around for a while, and I guess he kind of left it as we'll see if it comes to be. But essentially, again, talking about the fact that the Lightning could trade former captain and player who's still under contract, Henrik Zetterberg, where he's on long-term injury reserve. They could trade that contract to the Lightning for Tyler Johnson, is what the rumored trade was. Of course, the Lightning then get to shed Johnson's $5 million cap hit, and then they also get a LTIR contract that they could use. Basically, as a loophole, we've seen other teams do, to kind of spend over the cap to be able to keep Anthony Cirelli and Eric Chernak. So we'll see if they do that. I'm wondering, though, why it hasn't happened already. If it's going to, is the only kind of reason of doubt I might have to think it's going to happen. But unless maybe they kind of have somewhat of a handshake agreement saying that, maybe as a last resort we'll do that. But obviously, if they could find another deal first, maybe they'll go that route instead. Not really sure, but according to Friedman, he still thinks that's a possibility that we could see that happen. And as we know, as we're getting closer to the NHL being able to announce the plans for the 2021 season, teams are going to have to act fairly quick to become cap compliant. And there's several of them, including the Lightning and others, that are in that boat. And it's just a touch base again on the Islanders again. Almost like I said, I mentioned the Barzal contract, but it's rumored that they have handshake agreements, and they just haven't been filed yet with guys like Andy Green in defense, Matt Martin up front, as well as Corey Schneider. Now, I mentioned before, Schneider likely could be the number 3 goalie playing in their minor league system, so he may not even count against their cap, assuming he signs for $1 million or less, which is pretty likely. So they're also a team to watch as well, because obviously they have that big Barzal contract that has to be hammered out, and then they have these guys that they're not really able to register as fully contracted players yet until that gets sorted. So we could definitely see some additional moves out of them as well. Now, as I mentioned, the Vegas Golden Knights are a team that's been hot and heavy in the rumor mill over the past number of days, ever since it's been revealed so much players they might be looking to move on from in order to create a better cap situation, because many of the teams that we've talked about already, they're in a bad cap situation. They have no choice but to move out salary to become compliant for the coming 2021 NHL season. And it was revealed on TSN Insider Trading a number of days ago now. I think it was probably within the past week. Frank Seravalli mentioned that they were pushing really hard to move Pacioretty. Now, it wasn't just a matter of that they're exploring things. He used the words that they're doubling down on trying to find a trade for the $7 million player who you could probably argue was one of their most productive players last year and one of their top guys in the playoffs. So as much as I understand they're in that predicament, they do have to do something. It's a little bit surprising to see his name be at the forefront here of what they'd want to trade. I mean, you just don't give away 30 goal scorers. At the end of the day, they gave up a pretty hefty price tag to Montreal to acquire him, and Thomas Tatar, Nick Suzuki, draft picks and stuff like that. They gave up quite a price tag. And they likely would have a hard time getting close to that return because of the way the market has changed. So, obviously, it's looking to do a cap dump, but Pacioretty's name has been popping up on a lot of different scenarios. And the most recent one, which I was surprised by, but still I wanted to review the article here, is through Pittsburgh Hockey Now. I mean, now the reporter for the website here is indicating that he has multiple sources indicating that the Penguins have been reaching out to the Vegas Golden Knights and are very interested in Pacioretty. Now, this does pose some different issues. I mean, clearly the Penguins don't have a whole lot of cap space, so affording a player $7 million would require a decent amount of money going out for starters. And the next biggest question too is, where do you put him in your lineup? I mean, not to say that he's certainly a strong enough player to play in their top six for sure. He's a top 1 or 2 line player on just about every team in the NHL, but at the same time, they've already made enough other moves. They have Jake Gensel, they have Jason Zucker. Does one of them get bumped down? That's a lot of money tied up in your top 3 wingers on the left side, so it just seems unlikely in that sense, and I don't see a scenario popping up that they would want to trade one of those 2 players out to bring Pacioretty in. And even if they did, I don't see Vegas wanting to do that on the other side because they need to shed salary. Now, could they take back another forward who's less expensive than Pacioretty and save some cap space? I guess that is a possibility. The only thing that would kind of make sense to me is if they traded Zucker for Pacioretty. I'm not sure the Penguins would do that, but obviously, from Vegas' standpoint, Zucker does have ties to the Vegas area. I could see there being interest in that regard, but I'm not sure that that's a deal that we're going to see. But obviously, the article does also mention that because of the cap situation, that this would be a very difficult deal to pull off, and that it's, because of that, not extremely likely that they would figure things out, that it was more of a case of the Penguins and Rutherford kind of poking around, having exploratory conversations, contacting Vegas, figuring out what the price tag would be in order to make that happen and kind of see where things go from there. But, I mean, we've seen the Penguins make other moves this offseason. Like, you would think heading into camp that their top 6 is already set. Not to say that as a GM, you're always looking for ways to make your team better, always looking for ways to improve your team. So I get that. It just seems like it would be a pretty tall task to be able to pull off, given both teams' salary cap situation. So I must say, even though the article is mentioning that the Penguins have a lot of interest from multiple sources, and they're having exploratory conversations about it, I'm just not really sure how we can see a scenario where this could work out. But I guess we will see if the Penguins and Pacioretty talk continues to go any further or not. Now, speaking of other players on the Golden Knights that's been in the rumor mill, I've come across other articles indicating that it looks as though the Golden Knights and the Predators of Nashville have been having some exploratory conversations around Jonathan Marchessault. Now, Marchessault does have form of a no-trade clause as well, but I would think that most players would not have Nashville on their no-trade for the most part. I think most players love the city, fun place to play, good environment, good team, good ownership and all that, so I really would imagine that most players would want to play in Nashville if they had the opportunity. If they had to be traded, that'd be one of the teams they would accept to. So we'll see where that goes. But I mean, obviously, that kind of a salary would obviously work well for Vegas to become cap compliant as well. The Predators have been linked to multiple things this offseason, and I do have another report. Speaking of the Predators, they could be having exploratory conversations on the Marchessault front, but I think at this point they have enough cap space to add another scoring forward. They really need that as well, and I think David Poile is weighing out all the options. I'll be surprised, very surprised in fact, if by the time the season starts, before the puck drops, that they do add another scoring forward, either through trade or through free agency, one of the two. They've been linked already to having interest in Mike Hoffman, who's now a free agent and is unsigned right now. I mean, obviously the top scoring player from last year and from recent years that has no contract as we speak. They've also been linked to trading with other players and other teams as well. So the Predators having interest in Marchessault, to me, does make a lot of sense. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the price tag to give up would be. We're probably looking at the terms of something for future considerations, draft pick, prospect, something to that nature, because Vegas really can't take much back for their cap, obviously, because they don't hardly have any space. But I mean, they could take something back on a smaller scale. So there is a possibility the return could involve some sort of NHL roster player of some sort. Now, there's also reports of the Predators maybe having a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, because as I mentioned, they've been apparently, according to the rumor mill, been having a lot of exploratory talks with a lot of fronts here on how to add somebody else. As I mentioned, like with Tampa, they could be looking at a guy like an Alex Killorn, Tyler Johnson, or there is some talk, would David Poile be bold enough to haul out that offer sheet and try to sign Anthony Cirelli, who the Lightning are trying to free up the space to make sure they get under contract, as I see him as a big part of their future. Now, clearly in the case of Cirelli, I think he's probably pretty unlikely to sign an offer sheet. It'd have to be something that he feels that Tampa would just never offer. But at the same time, you can never say never, I guess, and I wouldn't blame Poile for trying. But obviously the Lightning are a key team that they could prey on and see what they can get out of Tampa. But, maybe they're not really overly interested in guys like Johnson or Killorn. They have, like I said, they can go the Hoffman route, maybe try to sign him as a free agent. They could trade with Vegas for Marchessault. There's other players out there as well, even including Pacioretty, although the Predators haven't been directly linked to him that I've seen so far. But I guess we will see at this point. But I do expect David Poile to be a busy general manager and make one more splash here before the season gets underway. We've seen his history in the past. He's not afraid to be bold and make big moves, and he will be doing something, I can pretty well bet on that will add an extra scoring punch to the Predators lineup before heading into the 2021 NHL season. So as I mentioned before, I fully suspect the NHL trade activity and some free agent signings to really pick up the pace here in the next week or so as the NHL gets closer and closer to announcing details of the 2021 season. Teams are not going to have a choice but to become cap compliant and make roster changes and decisions before heading into training camp. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today, and we will discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.